The line at the airport was quiet that morning. People were rolling suitcases forward one step at a time, checking their phones, thinking about the family waiting on the other side. And then a man about 10 feet ahead of everyone else stepped up to the officer's desk, handed over his passport and green card, the little plastic card that means permanent resident of the United States. And instead of the normal stamp and a wave through, the officer paused. That pause is the moment a lot of families are starting to hear about. The officer typed something into a computer, looked back at the screen again, and said 4 words that changed the entire trip. "Please step over here." If you have never seen that moment before, you might think it is routine. Sometimes it is, sometimes it is not. My name is Sarah, and I have spent years watching how immigration policy actually shows up in real life for families, at airports, border crossings, and immigration offices. I am not here to scare you. I am here so that if you ever hear those words, "Please step over here," you already understand what is happening and what your options are. Because what people are calling the new travel restrictions in 2026 are creating confusion, especially for green card holders, people who legally have the permanent right to live in the United States. And here is the part most people stop reading before they get to: do not make that mistake. Having a green card does not mean the airport is just a doorway. It means you still pass through a system, and that system runs on databases, flags, and records that most people never see. First, let's talk about how the system actually works. When you land at a U.S. airport, the first officer you meet works for Customs and Border Protection, CBP, the federal agency responsible for checking people entering the United States. The officer scans your passport and your green card, which is officially called a permanent resident card, proof that you are allowed to live in the United States permanently. That scan pulls up a record from several databases used by the Department of Homeland Security, DHS, the federal department that oversees immigration enforcement, border control, and national security. Those systems check several things at once. They check travel history, how long you were outside the United States. They check immigration records, whether any forms or applications are pending. They check enforcement records, meaning whether any agency has placed a note or warning on your file. And they check security watch lists, lists maintained by national security agencies that flag individuals for further review. Most people pass through this check in under a minute. But if something in the record triggers a review, the officer can send the traveler to what is called secondary inspection. Secondary inspection is simply a separate room where officers review documents more carefully and ask additional questions. And here is something many green card holders do not realize. Even though a green card means permanent resident, CBP officers still have the authority to question whether that permanent residence has been maintained, meaning whether the person still truly lives in the United States. Stay with me, because this next part applies to people who thought they were completely safe. The first thing I keep hearing from families, from neighbors, from WhatsApp groups, from social media, sounds like this: green card holders are banned from entering the U.S. now. That rumor spreads quickly, but it is not accurate. Green card holders are still lawful permanent residents, meaning the law recognizes their right to live in the United States. The issue people are encountering is not a ban on green card holders. It is increased scrutiny when officers believe someone may have been living outside the United States for too long. The next rumor I hear all the time is this: if you have a green card, the officer cannot stop you. That is not correct either. Officers cannot cancel your green card on the spot without due process, meaning legal review. But they can question you, delay entry, and in some cases, ask you to sign documents that affect your status. And here is where things become important. Another rumor I hear is, if you stay outside the U.S. under 1 year, you are always safe. In reality, immigration officers look at more than the calendar. They look at whether the United States still appears to be your primary home, where you live, work, pay taxes, and maintain ties. The next one comes from social media posts that spread panic very quickly. Airports are secretly canceling green cards. What actually happens is more procedural. In some situations, officers present a document called Form I-407, a form used when someone voluntarily gives up permanent residency. The key word there is voluntarily, and here is something many careful, educated people still do not realize. Signing that form ends permanent resident status immediately. No judge, no hearing, just a signature. And here is the part immigration attorneys charge serious money to explain. You do not have to sign anything on the spot. You have the right to ask to speak with an immigration attorney, meaning a lawyer who handles immigration law, before agreeing to any document. Let me tell you about someone I will call Ahmed. Ahmed had lived in the United States for years and had a green card. His mother overseas became ill, and he spent many months traveling back and forth caring for her. When he returned one winter, the officer saw long stretches outside the country in the travel record. Ahmed was taken to secondary inspection. An officer placed Form Y-407 in front of him and explained that because he had been outside the United States for extended periods, he could choose to give up his green card and enter with a temporary visa instead. Ahmed paused. He asked if he could speak with a lawyer. The officer removed the form and allowed him to continue the process. Ahmed eventually entered the country as a permanent resident and later worked with an attorney to document his ties to the United States. Now, I want to be clear. I share stories like this to help you understand what these situations look like in real life, not to identify any one person. And I want to pause here for a moment and acknowledge something many families feel but rarely say out loud. Travel uncertainty is exhausting. You plan visits, family weddings, medical trips, and suddenly a routine return flight feels like a test you did not know you were taking. The fear people describe most often is not delay. It is separation. The possibility of not being allowed to come home the way they expected. That feeling is real. But awareness changes the situation dramatically, because when you understand what officers are looking for, you can prepare. And here is where many people get caught by invisible rules. If you have been outside the United States for long stretches, especially 6 months or more, officers may ask whether you still maintain U.S. residence. If you stopped filing U.S. taxes, that can raise questions. If you no longer maintain a U.S. address, that can raise questions. If your travel history shows repeated long absences, the system flags it automatically. And here is the situation many viewers are in right now. If you already live in the United States, have a green card, and are planning international travel for family reasons, this matters to you before you board that plane. If you have a green card but have been living abroad temporarily for work or caregiving, this matters when you return. If you are a U.S. citizen with a spouse or parent who holds a green card and travels frequently, this affects your family planning as well. And before I explain the steps you can take right now, stay with me for just another minute, because this next part is the one people are grateful they heard before they traveled. First, review how long you have been outside the United States. Write down the exact travel dates so you can answer clearly if asked. Second, carry evidence that the United States remains your home. That can include a lease, utility bills, employment records, or tax filings. Third, never sign immigration documents at the airport without understanding them fully. Fourth, if officers ask questions, answer calmly and truthfully. But remember, you may request to speak with an immigration attorney before signing anything. Now I need to talk about something else that appears every time immigration rules change. Scammers. Right now, there are people advertising guaranteed travel clearance or airport protection letters for large fees. Those documents have no legal power at the airport. No private company can override federal immigration officers. If someone promises they can protect your green card at the airport for money, that is a scam. Let me share another story. A woman I will call Maria contacted a community legal clinic after a frightening airport experience. She had been outside the United States caring for her father for nearly a year. When she returned, officers questioned whether she had abandoned her residence, meaning whether she had stopped living primarily in the United States. Maria had kept her U.S. apartment lease, filed taxes, and maintained employment records. Those documents helped show that her stay abroad was temporary. She was admitted as a permanent resident. And again, I want to be clear. Stories like this are shared so people can understand the situation, not to identify any specific person. There is another tool families sometimes forget exists. If you are a U.S. citizen or green card holder and a family member's immigration case becomes delayed or confusing, you can contact your congressional representative's Constituent Services Office. That simply means the staff members in a member of Congress's office who help residents deal with federal agencies. They cannot override immigration law, but they can request information and sometimes help move cases that feel stuck in the system. And now I want to remind you of something very important. Even in moments of uncertainty, you still have rights. You have the right to remain calm and ask questions. You have the right to request an immigration attorney before signing documents. You have the right not to sign paperwork you do not understand. Those rights exist for a reason. They are tools, not obstacles. And here is the perspective I want to leave you with tonight. Immigration policy in the United States has shifted many times over the decades. Different administrations change how strictly certain rules are checked. But the underlying immigration laws themselves, the statutes that define permanent residency, do not change overnight. Families who understand the system, keep their records in order, and stay informed navigate these moments far more smoothly than those caught by surprise. So if you take anything from what we talked about tonight, let it be this: preparation changes outcomes. And that quiet moment at the airport desk, the one where the officer pauses and types something into a computer, feels very different when you already know what may happen next. I read the comments carefully, and if you have a specific situation, travel plans, family concerns, questions about green cards or airport inspections, you can share it below. I cannot replace an attorney for individual legal advice, but I will always try to help you understand the system so you are never walking into it alone.